my lovely visual galactic lovelies. That's right, people. Mind the Force has officially gone visual. I can see myself on the screen. You can see me. Maul is here as always. And this is a very exciting episode of Mind the Force. Very exciting indeed, because, there's many reasons why it's exciting. This is exciting. You know, the visual. You can see me pointing at you, pointing at me, pointing at you. But I'm joined by Mr. James Abbate, who some of you will affectionately remember from our Cad Bane episode and how brilliant he was. Well, he was so goddamn brilliant that I asked him if he wanted to join me permanently on this Mind the Force journey. James, how the hell are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you, Kristine, and I really appreciate you having me, and I appreciate all of you listening and watching. This is just very cool. I think that Star Wars is very, universal, not just galactic, and it's just going to be a really cool ride now that, I love it. And honestly, I was hoping Kristine would ask because it's just such an honor, and there's just so much to get into. And to me, it's literary analysis. There's a lot you could talk about with Star Wars, with life, and I'm here to share that with all of you. So thank you for listening.
I'm really excited to have you. I remember you were the second person that I told, and you just got it right away. I remember from like the first second I told you about it, you were like, "That's the best idea I've ever heard," and I guess I just appreciated that, and I appreciate how entrenched you are in the world. Like, just how well read you are. And I mean, not that you've, like, of course, you've seen all the films and all television shows, but the amount of novels that you read, the amount of comic books that you read, like keeping up with them, like in real time. You're the kind of nerd I was looking for, James. Just
Perfect.
the kind of nerd I was looking for.
That's the goal too. It's once you have one bite of Star Wars, you just got to keep eating. You eat the whole pie. It's I'm voracious only because the content's so good. There's just such an ever unfolding story that you learn bits and pieces, bit by bit of the galaxy. And it's just from different times, different eras. It's worth exploring. It's kind of our age's Tolkien. It's just kind of its own universe, and really just fascinating the deeper you go into the character psyches, because that's what it's really about, the people, people in this galaxy far away.
Right? Like, I love that. Like, every time you get a little more, it like adds to the puzzle. And it's like, it's like it gets more vibrant and just more interesting. And I love when they connect in the big ways, but like when they connect in the little ways where it's like, I'm over here doing this thing and it's not really directed at that, but you're still gonna like see why it's like in the same world. And it's so satisfying. It's a very satisfying world.
For sure. The John Williams motifs definitely set that up. You could start to see that, especially across the different, trilogies. You're like, oh, okay, this echoes that. and
Right?
and it all connects, really. It's such a of course it has its flaws and its imperfections, like any art. To me, give it to me flaws and all. But I ultimately just enjoy really every story. It's just really fun to get into, because the more you look, the more you see, and you see yourself in it too. You're like, I can relate to that character's motives, as terrible as they may be, or as great as they may be. I see myself in them to some degree, and that's what I think Star Wars does successfully.
And that's why you're on the show, James, because that's exactly the point of what we do here at Mind the Force. We take that fiction and we bring it on back into our own lives. And it's a wonderful thing. So today, on episode 10, I can't believe we've made it to episode 10. This is yay. The amount of podcasts that don't make it to episode 10 is extensive. So very, very proud of that.
Double digits, we're in it. And thank you for starting me off with the number 10.
Right? It's a good number. It's nice and whole, nice even number. Today we are covering Miss Barriss Offee, as you've probably seen from the title of the episode. And I'm really excited to get into Barriss. I loved her character in Clone Wars, and I always thought, after everything happened with the temple bombing, framing and everything, and she went to jail, I'm like, what what did happen to Barriss Offee, and Tales of the Empire delivered on that, I think, very nicely, very succinctly in the short little episodes it gave. And I don't know, I feel like the only place we might see her again is maybe she pops up with Ahsoka at some point, because she was, like, out there being a healer on this planet.
It's gotta
It
be.
seems like the kind of type of thing that Fulcrum would come across.
It has to.
Like, and I feel like they're both so zen at that point that, like, she's not even gonna be mad. She's gonna
Right.
be like,
Because they've
Barriss."
killed their egos and they've went through those transformations, right? You know?
Exactly, like, I feel like if it happened when they were younger, like,
You
Barriss
know,
would be awkward, Ahsoka would be, I mean, Ahsoka never really gets, like, mad. But, yeah, no, I think it would be a very chill thing for them to run into each other as adults, like, even just in passing, doesn't have to be a deep thing.
they're like, "It's a big galaxy. We've been through a lot of big guff in our galaxy." Can you say the S word on this? Or should I?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, no, we say all the fucking stuff.
Oh, I'll fucking say
Definitely.
shit then. Okay, great.
Yeah, no, definitely, this is not a child-friendly program. Like,
Good to know then in that case, then, yeah, they've been through a lot of shit, so I think at the end of the day, by the point where their arcs intersect, in Ahsoka, say, in the New Republic era, it's definitely gonna be interesting because you can kinda see that already with the characters there and how they're interacting, especially Mandalorian, kind of society in terms of, like, just the characters we've seen throughout that, series. It's definitely, a lot of growth. When Boba Fett, for instance, is now, and he's kind of more of an I don't wanna say anti-hero, but he's kind of like a deuteragonist and not quite Venom. He's a little bit nicer these days. Honestly, Boba Fett's as ruthless as he is
right.
as a crime lord, he's become that endearing guy. He's definitely not the villain. Cad Bane was on the other end of that gun, in that fight. And I think that's what Star Wars is good at, flipping, and that's what Barriss Offee recently they did in Tales. Completing her story if they want to, if there's never another thing about her, great arc. But
Right,
if
then
there's
that's
more,
okay.
then give it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I agree. I think they did a very nice job of delivering, like, a redemption story. Star Wars loves a redemption story. And yeah, no, if in the 40, what would it be, 45 minutes I got of Barriss, I feel
Yeah.
pretty solid about where she ended up. I guess they left it on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but is it weird? I'm like, I don't really care if she lived or died. Like, it served when it needed to.
It echoes, right? And it kinda almost doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I mean, it
Right, it
does, but it
doesn't
doesn't,
matter. Like, right, I think the purpose was, like, that she got through to Lynn, to Fourth Sister, and we saw that, and that was, like, what she wanted, and she's at peace with that. And so I feel at peace with that, if that makes any sense.
Me too. She made a point and she made it successfully, even if it was on the other end of a lightsaber, but it's that moment in Star Wars where they see, "What have I done?" And they,
Right,
like with the Vader overthrowing, Palpatine kind
right,
of moment. That's what Lynn, the moment, and that they kind of shared in terms of her realization that, love triumphs hate sort of thing. It's not all just power and ego.
right.
Um,
But before we get too deep into things, we have the little business before the big business. Before we get into Barris's whole storyline, where we're gonna start from the beginning and go through her life as a Padawan and a Jedi, and we'll get to all that other juicy shit later. First, for all of you awesome listeners, to stay up to date on everything Mind the Force, please check us out in all the places. There's mindtheforce.com, there's Instagram, there's Facebook, and for all the latest episodes, including this one, which you'll find on YouTube because that's where you get the videos, please follow, like, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, as I said, et cetera, et cetera. If you hit the link tree, you'll find all the lovely clickables, and you can click them and find all the stuff. And you can have a good time and share it with all your friends. Hit us with the 5-star ratings because that's just how we look really good on the internet. And that's just what we're really trying to do at the end of the day, is look really cool on the internet. Email me email me and James now. Email the both of us. We'll both see it at mindtheforcepodcast@gmail.com to tell us all your big Star Wars feelings. We love all of them. And fans have a lot of big feelings these days. A lot of big feelings. And, listen to this podcast and then go do all of that immediately. Go do it right away. Just, get going on that. And last but never least of the business, our content spoiler warning. Mind the Force podcast is a retrospective on Star Wars characters across all Star Wars content. All films, TV shows, novels, comic books, and video games are up for discussion. If you don't want some aspect of currently released Star Wars content to be spoiled, I turn around now. And without further ado, let's get into it, Mr. Abbate. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Let's start at the beginning, right? A long time ago, a galaxy far away.
Indeed, indeed. So, Barriss Offee. She is a Maril. I never say this right. I've been trying to say it right all day. Marilyn. Marilyn? Maril.
Marilyn. I think they were saying Mariel
Marilyn.
and Marilyn. I could be wrong, though, but that's what I kept picking up.
Okay. Marilyn. So she's a Marilyn, about the same age as Ahsoka. I feel like we never get an exact age on Ahsoka, because isn't Ahsoka 11 when she
Yeah,
becomes Anakin's Padawan?
yeah, and there's actually an age discrepancy between them. Even the official Star Wars kind of like output, I think it was in 2018, they put out wrong information on the age, saying, she's X number of years older, and then they're like, oh, that doesn't jive. So there's been contradictions, even to the point where Wikipedia, for instance, like kind of says this article disputes, the facts that were put out based on the age. So that's an
Right? I feel like
interesting.
that's every single article on Wikipedia has the disclaimer at the
You're right.
top
We
with a
disagree with
picture of Yoda.
that.
Be like,
It's yeah,
this is an incomplete article. Like, are you all incomplete articles?
it's from a certain point of view, right?
Right, right.
That's
The problem with internets. I can only imagine what the Acolyte pages are looking like right now. I'm not even trying to go on those.
Oh yeah, haven't seen the new one. I will watch after.
Yeah, no, I have not watched the new episode, nor have I watched the season 2 premiere of House of the Dragon.
Oh, I thought it was interesting. It's definitely it changed some things from the books and was kind of a bit more muted in an interesting way, as violent as that show can be. But I think it's one of the best stories out there. That and Star Wars are really, I don't put my nose up at it. I'm in the
No.
fandom. I very much enjoy it all.
Right, James is a proper nerd, everyone. He's like read all the books of all the stuff. I mean, the glories of being in the literary industry. You're a very big book reader. I respect the fuck out of it.
Thank you. Yeah, book nerd, book editor, and I'm just all about it. I always kind of just spend my days reading, and as you can see, Star Wars right here, the black, red, and white, the Vader series. They're also doing it with Maul. Excellent. It's midway through. Kristine, definitely recommend that.
Yes, I've been all the things I'm meaning to read. My short list is very long.
I hear you. Trust me, it takes forever, but bit by bit.
Exactly. But getting back to Barriss, so she was a pretty standard Padawan, like nothing too extraordinary about her. So she was brought in and raised a Padawan in the order, and her master was Luminara Unduli, who was also, I know they weren't the same race, but they had a very similar look.
Agreed.
And-
Between Aayla Secura, Shakti, Luminara back in the day, until I got to know them, like, I just kind of looked at them as, like, different colored aliens, like, who are they, what are their stories? I need more stories to differentiate them, and Clone Wars really fleshed them
Right.
out, even giving very minor characters more of, like, Quinlan Vos stuff, more of a, more depth, more layers.
Right? I mean, that's my favorite thing about Star Wars was just the amount of detail that you got, like with these like passing characters that you'd see in a room or in a scene in the
Mhm.
films. Like Clone Wars made them an actual character, which is super nice. So, we first meet Barriss. So I know that she's actually introduced in the books. So I know that she's introduced in the books before she comes into Clone Wars. So she isn't already like established kind of sub character.
Pretty much, she came in, like, it was Legends, I guess, at the time, pre-episode
Yeah.
2, then came in, that was the first canon appearance, but of course, at that time, Legends and canon were one, and then after the split, Disney kept her. Of course, she was in Clone Wars, but then recently revived in Tales of the Empire, so now we could see her whole canon arc and her whole Legends arc, but she did originate in the novels, yep, and then made that appearance in 2, 'cause, George liked to do that.
Yeah.
He's like, "I want Ayla, I want these characters in the movies now, they're so cool, good job, team."
Good job, guys. You did it.
You did put it on the
Yes.
fridge.
Yes, we do see her in a few scenes, in 2 scenes, I believe, in Attack of the Clones. She's in Senator Palpatine's office for whatever reason, and then she's at the Battle of Geonosis when they're rescuing Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan.
Nice job.
And so that was very exciting to like, it's cool to, like, look back and see her in live action. That's definitely very cool, but, of course, we get the meat and potatoes in
Yeah.
Clone Wars, the animated series.
Yeah.
So, we first meet her in Clone Wars as a real fleshed out person, pretty much there as a juxtaposition to Anakin and Ahsoka. Luminara and Barriss are just, like they're so, like, clean cut and proper and, like, emotionless and, like, they're practical. They're very practical, and that is an ongoing theme that I see with Barriss, really as a person. Like, throughout her entire arc from, like, start to finish, she is a practical lady and very pragmatic, like, definitely a survivor. She is a survivor to a fault, but she is pragmatic to a fault, and I think that's really what she took from her master.
Agreed.
Um
She could, as emotional as she could be sometimes, I would still say she was way less emotional than many characters, even Anakin, throughout the series. I think she's really got ticked off, especially at the trial and whatnot. But for the most part, she always had a kind of, it's hard to say objective view of reality because no one truly does, but she was more leveled. And that's interesting as
Yeah.
a great character for what the action she committed. You kind of just understand her mindset so much. It's like if she did anything else, it kind of almost would have been nonsensical for her. You know what I mean? It's like you could see the tract of her mind, of her psychology.
She had the right intentions for what she was trying to achieve, she just went about it wrong. But so she's there really as this, like, anti-character of Ahsoka. Like, Ahsoka and Anakin are super passionate, very emotional, very, like, highly charged, and really wear their emotions, particularly for each other, on their sleeve. Like, the way that like, in this particular episode where Ahsoka and Barriss have to go into this warehouse basically to plant some bombs. Basically plant some bombs that are gonna, like, be against the Separatists, which you remember from the episode. Like, there's a point where they aren't going to be able to get out, and Anakin is just, like, freaking out about that, like, "What? We have to go in, we have to save them, we have to do what we have to do." And Luminar is just like, "No, no, we don't have time for that. Like, that's gonna jeopardize the mission. Like, it's okay." Like, they know they're not gonna get out. And, of course, that's not how Snips and Sky Guy roll. So that's not what happened. God forbid Ahsoka and Anakin don't get what they want.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, no, you see just this, like, huge comparison between the 2. I mean, which is the point. You see these, like, very rule following, very above board Jedi and Padawan, and they follow the rules, they get things done, and really that's how Barriss is essentially raised by this woman to be like, "Tote the party line. Do what you need to do, and, like, everything will be okay." And I think what's then interesting is, like, though we see her, like, in battle and a very capable soldier, as, like, all the Padawans are kinda raised to be during Clone Wars, she doesn't really have much of a taste for it. Like, she really doesn't like being out in the battle, and so she actually goes back to the temple quite a lot. I think that's where she is when we don't see her in the show, is that she's at the temple working with the injured Jedi.
Yeah, being a medic and a healer, kind of in a sense. They're out in
Exactly.
Nam, and she's back stateside at times helping, and sees only on the receiving end. At the end of
Exactly.
the tunnel for those people in some cases.
Exactly. And it's really during this time that I think that sense of radicalization starts to set in, because she's seeing, like, if you're not out in the battlefield, like, you're, like, in the hospital, in the sick bay, you're just seeing the consequences. Like, you're not
Exactly.
feeling the adrenaline, you're not in the rush of battle, you're not
Honor of
in,
war.
like, the honor for, like,
Yeah,
you're not in
yeah,
the throes of victory.
right.
You're
It's
just, like,
not
in the
smart.
sadness of, like, "Oh, this guy lost a leg," and,
Severed
like, in
limbs.
SpongeBob, "My leg,
Yeah, my leg, yeah.
my
That's
leg."
that's all it is. It's just that scene over and over, and psychologically, I think that distresses her. I think the two reasons she became who she did in the middle sort of, was A, being so overly sensitized to it that she had to become desensitized or her mind would shatter, you know? It was a defense mechanism in one way, and the other was that, plant extract that supposedly, or did, increase her force sensitivity, so that made her wary of Jedi because she got a dark vibe from them, so there's I would say it's kind of dual, or there's, like, a duel of the fates there, but
Right?
Dual. So
Yeah,
it's
no, I
just
think
she has 2 different
and I do find it interesting, and I wanted to ask you because I knew you would be more versed on this. Because of course, unless you're reading as much of the source material as you've read, sometimes things on Wikipedia can be a little unclear. So, is there a source in the comics or the novels where it shows her being exposed to that plant that, like, opened her mind like
Um
LSD?
I don't believe so. Her appearance in the comics have been pretty sporadic. I know she was, like, in adventures, like, Forces of Destiny sorta stuff, like, Ahsoka had it one. Ahsoka's even barely in the comics, honestly. She's finally getting an adaptation of the show, but, she's, like, here and there in the adventure lines in the was IGN not IGN, IDW and Dark Horse releases. Barriss has barely appeared, so they don't really go into that, but they could because now they're going more into prequel stuff like Jango, Darth,
Yeah.
Darth Maul. They're going in that direction, and I think now with the end of Return of the Jedi anniversary era being over, them kinda moving out of the High Republic Phase 3, this
Mhm.
is like a and done now, like I said in the comics with the Vader arc almost. I don't know how he'll appear, but I think they're gonna this is the turning point, the next, like, new era of Star Wars that we're entering. It's kind of they're giving signposts, but you're not really fully
Mhm.
seeing what it's gonna be, but you can kinda see we're entering phase 4 now, whatever, this is post-Endgame sort of. We're seeing who the main people will be, and I think, you and I had discussions, we think Thrawn, Barriss Offee seems like she has a future. Definitely the Jedi games, Survivor and Fallen Order, those are developing characters too that are also in the comics, and I think and even Cad Bane too, let's see where he goes in Boba Fett. There's a lot that can be done, and they've interwoven these stories for years, which is good. It's not like they just come out of the blue. So really, these have been going out since like 1977, 2008. So today it's just we're seeing it take fruit, and we're seeing all these underexplored stories that never really receive screen time or comic time. Is the long answer,
Nice.
but the short answer is
Nice.
no.
We love a long answer. We love a rant here at Mind Force. Love a
Yep.
rant.
Got
I think that would be super interesting because, just seeing little blurbs about like how she became even more radicalized. Like, I would love to see her like in like the medical bay at the temple, like dealing with the fallen Jedi. Sorry, it's 10:30 and I'm where I am. So excuse me. I'm sleepy Kristine sometimes comes out to play.
7:30 in Vegas.
I am I
It's crap
am
time.
right? I'm not bored. I'm definitely not bored. I'm just tired. I think it'll be fascinating to see like the process of that radicalization. I love watching that kind of like character development build, particularly with things in relation to the dark side. Like I feel the same way about Reva Savander. I'm like, where's
Mhm.
my novel about her being raised in the Inquisitorius? Like I want to see that. But yeah, same with Barris. Like I want to see her in the hospital. I want to see her take that LSD plant. I want to see her
Yep.
like get that like raised awareness. And like you said, become more sensitive and wary of the Jedi. Like it's almost like her senses got heightened and she's like, there's fuckery afoot. I don't know what's going on, but I know that it's bad.
Right.
And so, that would be awesome if they played that out, even in like a short run of the comics. That'd be really cool to see.
I think they're working their way up. I think she's kind of like coming up under Ahsoka's wing as like that branch of characters. It's kind of like
Yeah.
every comic or character, they kind of have an umbrella under which other characters generally fall. Like with the Bounty Hunters comics, they kind of group them. So she's kind of in the Ahsoka brand, which is kind of out
Yeah.
branching now and really taking off and building. I think you and I, maybe the fans don't know this, but you and I had discussions, maybe the future it won't be so Vader heavy, but more Anakin heavy, maybe as a Force ghost now with Hayden's return to and Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going, into the next era of who Anakin Skywalker is. He's not trapped in that costume forever. He is eternal, sort of. That was just a brief sojourn as like, a Sith. Now he's beyond that. So that could very much be the future of that character. we've just been looking at him as Vader all these years, but he is Anakin Skywalker underneath it all. So I think Barriss plays a role in that too, especially as it pertains to Ahsoka. So I think that's why they kind of paralleled her arc, Barriss's with Vader's, because now she can even see the Force Ghost maybe and be like, oh, we got some stuff in common, That could be
Yeah.
really interesting dialogue.
Because he would have been one of those masters that she was learning from at the time. Like, because she was able to, because they had those moments where, like,
They were together.
Ahsoka could see, like, how Master Luminara was different, Barriss could see how Anakin was different, but they both got results. Like, they were both, like, these great generals in the war and, like, these powerful Jedi. They just had very different styles, and neither of those styles were wrong. And so, I think that would be super interesting to see that come out to play with her character another time.
Well, but what makes them gray and great, great in terms of character development is, the gray part about them is they were still players and in some sense victims and perpetrators at the fall of an empire, in an era of war, and they killed kids. Let's be honest, they did some horrible things, but you have to measure it against what everyone else was doing at the time. Were they much worse than what others had done? I mean, the Jedi slayed a lot of people. Could be defensive, but in some cases they went AWOL. Kind of Quinlan Vos, Asajj Ventress, kind of take that for example. Even though that was ultimately kind of a mission, there's a lot of gray, and that's what I think what made them so interesting, because now they had this redemption too, where they're like, we came out of this as survivors in a sense that Barriss, if she lived through that, spoiler, but we've made that disclaimer, through that lightsaber hole, if she came out of that hole, then she, is a survivor, as you said, and Vader, by being eternal after that and not dying, say like Palpatine did through his Voldemort cloning kind of, techniques, Vader may have reached that Brahmin, that Vishnu sort of thing where he is forever, and that's survival in a different sense. So there is a lot of connection between them, even with that horrible past, and that's kind of what Star Wars is. It's like, terrible situations, redemption, who kind of sees the bigger picture. And I think they, unlike Palpatine, they saw the bigger picture, and that kind of
Yeah.
speaks to maybe, not just Jedi and Sith, but like what's the best view, it's a certain point of view. What's the best point of view in the galaxy? And certainly, I think the whole point was it was not the Emperor, it was not the Sith,
Yeah.
but also the Jedi fell too, so
Yeah.
but they have periods of rebirth.
I definitely agree that there's so many different sides to the perspective as far as, like, and I mean, I feel like then that's kind of one of the larger themes of Star Wars that I really enjoy, is that, like, that balance of, like, good versus evil, but, like, you have all that contextual gray in the middle, because I feel like that really reflects on our own reality and really our own morality. Like, you have the sense of human morality where, like, what you think is right is really just a reflection of what benefits you the most, and that can look like so many different things from both sides of the aisle, whether you're talking about, like, different religions or different politics or different
Ideologies in
belief
general.
systems. Yeah,
Anything.
just ideologies in
Sports team.
general, like, exactly, it's like it's your tribe versus my tribe, and I feel like we've gotten to this place, particularly in America, but really across the world. I don't really think anybody's exempt from it
It's an
at
era.
this point, where, like, just that tribal sense of, like, the threat of the other,
Right, the otherness, the identity. Mhm.
the exactly, is just really hitting a wall.
Yeah, it's
Really hitting
a tug of war.
really hitting a wall. And I mean, and you see that in Star Wars over and over again, no
Factions.
matter what the other is. Like, even with the Jedi, like I said, like, anyone who isn't on their side, like, you're either with the Jedi or you're against the Jedi, and you're the dark side. It's like, I can't just have a different opinion from you. Like,
Right.
I don't have to be on the dark side to disagree with you.
There's a lot of right, it's not just 2 camps in the world, and I think that's a problem today in the world, of course, across every flavor,
Yeah.
but in this fictional world too, and that represents well. We were first introduced to, Empire versus Rebellion in, when in the first movie, the first source material, and at first you hear Rebellion, they're probably not too great, they're rebelling, but then you're like, "Well, Empire, that doesn't sound great either." That seems very controlling and domineering.
Right?
Maybe the rebellion's worth it, and you see it, you're like, "Okay, yeah, they're clearly heroes." Flash Gordon template, kinda clear cut in the first one, but then Empire deepens that connection, like, what if the the evil was the good's father? It's like, "Oh, well, now they're tethered together." And then,
Ah.
what if you gotta kill your father
Bum,
to save your
bum,
sister in the third
bum.
one? Yeah. It goes and then what if you
Ba-dum.
created C-3PO when you find out 20 years later? It goes into so many different layers of good, evil. In this scenario, okay, in this one, it's flipped,
Yeah.
it's just barreling over, and that's what's so incredible. And I think what Star Wars hammers home and is great is for as much as the diversity is and, all the different aliens and the planets and the species and the points of view, there's a lot more that binds them together, and that's the whole core that the Jedi at least encapsulate. So if I'm gonna choose Jedi or stuff, I choose Jedi because at least their ideology is generally on the way up, not the way down like the Sith. However, the yin and the yang, you kinda need that balance. The Jedi have no morality unless they have that sort of devil to fight sort of thing, in the form of whoever the ruling Sith is at that point. So
Yeah, no, what is God battling against without the devil?
right, right, but even the thing and I think what's good with, like, organizational religion in the sense that how Star Wars depicts is, like, even the arbiters of that, the guardsmen, like, the Jedi were prone to hubris, and they fell too. That was a whole thing, like, with Mace Windu and Yoda. Even Yoda was proud, the council maybe Anakin and Barriss were not so wrong. They everything needs reform or it gets stale. The Jedi
Yeah.
ossified, they became solid, and that hubris is like, "We are the Force." And it's like, "Well, no, you're channeling it." And that was a big they needed that rebirth sort of, and that death and rebirth. But, the Jedi thing, I think the way that it survives because it's like it's a river. It just ebbs and flows. It can never really disappear. Whereas the Sith, they can annihilate themselves through their they do true they both exist through the ages, but dark and light. But the Jedi, I think the players change, but the game doesn't. It's kind of like The Wire. I think that's
Yeah.
those the both of those works are really good at showing the universality of everything. Everyone's kind of the
Yeah.
same, but there's different points of view you can take that make you antagonists.
Yeah. I actually saw it was something that was definitely meant as like a cheeky internet thing, but of course, the way my mind works, I went like quite deep with it. Just because, like you said, that like the ideologies of the Jedi are what endure over time, but every system needs kind of like a refresh. You need to keep up with the times. You need to
Reboot.
understand like what is need currently. And it makes me, of course, as always, think of reality, and I think of like American politics, where we have the issue with like the Congress and the Senate, that there's all these old people that need to go because they've been there for 20,000 years
Change world.
and clearly do not have their finger on the pulse
No,
of modern day America.
or don't have a
And
pulse.
right, and there's no term limits. And you know who else didn't have any term limits?
Caesar.
900-year-old Yoda, who was just
Yeah,
there for hundreds of
that
years.
that's actually an excellent point. I never thought of that.
Just just pushing the same narrative they've been rocking for, like, a
What? When
millennium.
you
And
say it
it's
that
like
when you put it that
right?
way, Palpatine's like, "We need fresh blood as old as I am. I'm still younger than that guy. That guy's been in there forever." If you look
Right?
at it,
Like
Palpatine's kind of a populist. That's kinda blows my mind when you frame it that way.
right? Like, and that's why the Jedi never like,
Oh god.
updated because it's like, "Oh, like, we have to follow." Because really everyone, like, who's there at some point is like, "Oh, Master Yoda. Like, I'm gonna follow what Master Yoda says." And I mean, obviously, we don't know at this point a ton about Yoda's origin story, which in some ways I hope we never get
He could be an
because I feel like
assassin. He could be terrible when he could
right?
be
Like,
a master.
Yoda could be anybody, bro.
He could
He
be
could
and you
be
don't know his former he's like John Wick, and we have no idea. That's a lot of centuries. Think about it. If you
right?
were alive that long, we'd be Dracula. We'd be, friggin'
Exactly,
going
and
through ages.
and he's toting the party line for the past almost 1,000 years. So it's like and it's not that I don't think Yoda isn't capable of that change and that idealism, but it comes too little too late.
Well,
I feel like he has that reflectiveness later,
in Dog
like
Dagobah.
after. Yeah, but I feel like his hubris is, like, right up there with one of the main reasons
I
why.
agree, and I think that that's excellently showed. He's thrown into his own purgatory, his own Dante-esque kind of like purgatorio, or even top circle of hell. Not forever, so I'd say purgatory because, Yoda does get out of it and he divorces from his ego, and he does ultimately help bring about that restoration and
Yeah.
rejiggering of the Force. He needed to be alive to pass on the knowledge, to be that link in the chain to send to Luke and Leia and whatnot,
Yeah.
whomever, whatever Legends or canon, whatever Academy came thereafter and sustained, whether it was the New Republic, whatever. But Yoda suffered. He had to think about when I lost that game. He's like the uncle in Napoleon Dynamite, just thinking like, "Damn, if only I made it, if only varsity football, and if only I beat him on the Senate floor, we were hammer at each other." That's what politics are like today. If only we just
Right.
kill each other on the Senate floor, which was very Caesar-esque too, now that I think of that scene in 3. But they, at least the violence in Congress,
Yeah.
but they were very much yin and yang to Palpatine and Yoda. They were antithesis, and now with Barriss too, getting back to her, she's kind of fulfilling that balance. She's her and Lynn, her and Ahsoka. They need that diametric opposite to kind of complement one another and tell this full story.
A lot to be a lot to be looked at for that time period and for, I think, what those ideologies were bringing to the table of influence. And it actually did make me think of something with Barriss, just as we, like, move, like, through her time, like, as a Padawan, like, going, like, closer and closer to the temple bombing, is that imagine if she had, like, gone to the Jedi, and, like, we've seen this happen when someone goes to the Jedi with,
Mhm.
like, a question or a personal internal problem, or like, I'm having a feeling." Mea culpa. God forbid I have a feeling. If
Mhm.
she had gone and been like, "Hey, like, I don't know how I feel about the war. Like, I don't know if this is, like, the message that we really are trying to convey." Like, I mean, what would they have said?
I think there was a certain, honestly, practicality in the, Jedi. I think with their hubris, for good for better or worse, they became so solid and bound by the material world, by, material politics. They look at it today. How easy is it to get out of a war? Not too easy. Once you're in it, you're in it for the long haul, especially today.
Mhm.
In Star Wars, people like Mace Windu and Yoda even, they already resigned to the fact, he's like, "Begun this Clone War has," and because you said so. You announced the Clone War in it. Maybe you didn't fire the first shot, sure, but you sure as shit answered it, and you made that claim. You're the Centurion, and since you're you're not a military body, but until the clones came along, you kind of were that. You were knights. But
Yeah,
you're
like,
deciding this
you were
policy for everyone.
yeah, it's like we're like, "Oh, like, we're not going to be," like, they said in, like, Plagueis, like, "Oh, like, we're not gonna be weaponized, like, we're Jedi are not an army." It's like, you kind of are.
I mean,
How do you
granted,
think you're not an army? Like, there's thousands of you, you're walking around with laser swords,
right? You are
and you
just a
have
small
magic powers. Like,
Yeah, of course, you're the most dangerous things on the earth until the
yeah,
clones, till your own downfall came about, and you realize that's who you were fighting with.
exactly, you're peacekeepers. I think that's one of the things I really, as someone who is highly questionable of the Jedi, that's a friendly way to put it. I think what I really like they're doing in the Acolyte is they're really, like, showing the Jedi as, like, not the favorite in the universe. Like, when
Oh,
they go on the ship with the Trade Federation, where Osha's, working as the mech head, mech tech something, and the Trade Federation people are like, "Ah, no, it's the Jedi. Goddamn." Like,
right, like,
what do they want? It's like, "I don't mind control me, I'll just fucking tell you what you wanna
right,
know."
there if I saw one, I'm like, "What is this guy gonna do right now? Did I just get Men
Right?
in
Like,
Black, like Flash, and lose my
right? I'm just like,
short-term
"Don't hurt
memory?"
me." Like, what are you gonna do?
Right, I'd be terrified when I think of
Yeah.
just Superman comes in, you're only relying on his goodwill, he can melt your head in a second, you know? Um,
Exactly, and nothing will be done about it. They'll just be, like, totally justified to do it.
I
Like,
mean,
"Well, the Jedi said that that's what had to happen, so."
there are those restraints, but there are those rogue Jedi too. You see throughout Star Wars, they don't always follow the ideology that they purport to, and that's where the graying begins. And of course, that's what Acolyte, that's what the prequels, that's what less so the original, because the original was just different era of
Mhm.
movie making really, but everything thereafter pretty
Yeah.
much
And
expound
anything where you saw the Jedi, like, in power en masse, you kind of see, like,
power's
oh,
addictive.
like right? I mean, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and when you're walking around as the biggest, baddest thing in the galaxy and with, like, as far as you know, like, no adversary. Like, at the time, and they're just like, Sith aren't a thing, Sith haven't been seen in a millennia, or we don't know what they are. Like, you're just like, "I'm the biggest, baddest motherfucker on the block."
They were
Like
complicit in the Sith's rise, and I think Barriss Offee had it right, even though, again, I don't agree with her methods, generally speaking, but Ahsoka says this too, like you said in the novels. Ahsoka's like, she was trying to give us a message, and if we listened, maybe our hubris wouldn't have been the downfall of Jedi, and, we wouldn't have had to gone through this genocide and have this overweening, uh, autocrat take over. Palpatine wouldn't have risen if the Jedi had a strong guard, but they would turn around, pull their pants down, took a big dump in front of everyone, got drunk, let the invaders come into their home, and like the Vandals sort of came, and that's that. You let down your guard. You got proud there, Jedi, and you thought you were the shit. You got high off your own supply, and Barrett's like,
yeah.
"There's wolves at the door. He's right there," and that speaks to a morality too, in the sense where she's like, ignoring evil is evil. You are the knights, right? You're supposed to defend the Republic. You let the Republic fall. You dropped the egg. We had this thing and you dropped it. And the Jedi are, and I think that's what Yoda's punishment was, living without the rest of his life. And Barris
Right,
didn't
living
have to because she was again.
right, living with all that regret. And actually very, very interesting just on the point of living with regret as like being that the Acolyte's coming out in real time. Like I listen to my favorite podcast, which is House of Art. And they do deep dives on like all Star Wars stuff. And they do a ton of other stuff as well, but they always are doing Star Wars when there's something new coming out. And I was just listening to the episode 3 deep dive. And they were talking about Master Torben, the one that who was like meditating for 10 years, who was the Padawan in the flashback. And they were talking about pretty much the vow of silence that he took. Oh, and I wish I had written it down because it was wait, no, we're gonna Google this and live in real time.
We have
Jedi
the
vow
power at
of
our fingertips.
silence. Because they have yes, the Barrish vow. That's what it's called. The Barrish vow. And it was very interesting because they have one colleague, Ben Lindbergh, who comes on and he's like super Star Wars nerd. And so he comes on for Lore Corner. And so he's very deeply trenched in Star Wars lore. And so he came on, talked about the Barrish vow, which basically is when a Jedi goes into like this meditative like vow of silence, and they're like in deep meditation with the Force for like long periods of time. Like, don't talk to nobody, don't do nothing. Like, apparently at the time of Order 66, like the lore that's been told about actually in the Vader comics. Reading into the Vader comics, you would have seen this when he first I just heard this today. When he first becomes Vader, when Anakin first becomes Vader, one of the first things that Palpatine tasks him to do is to go get a kyber crystal so that he can like make his like own lightsaber. Like get a crystal, bleed it so it's red, and then like go have everything. And it's like, well, we just killed all the Jedi. Where am I getting a kyber crystal? And it's like, oh, at the time of Order 66, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of Jedi who had taken the Barish vow, who were like somewhere in the galaxy, deep in fucking meditation, who couldn't even, if they felt the disturbance in the Force of Order 66, they couldn't even come out of the Barish vow. Like they would just have to like not even pay attention to that because they're entrenched. Like something happened to them where they either weren't in tune with the Force or questioned their connection with the Force. And the Barish vow is basically them sitting in meditation with the Force and like
Hmm.
getting their Force mojo back on even ground. And I guess in the case of Master Torben, he did that for 10 years. And so pretty much Anakin or Vader went and found someone in this meditative state of the Barish vow and killed them, like while they were in that, so that he could like take their kyber crystal and bleed it. And it's very interesting because it also talks about, like I said, it made me think of, like you said, regret. And it made me remember that they said that at one point after Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan took the Barish vow in the desert. on Tatooine, because he had to just kind of sit there in his regret, and so he like needed to get right with himself. Like he did it at some point for a time, and I believe Yoda also did it at some point for a time.
Hence, maybe the ability to see Force ghosts, though it makes you wonder if I also wonder, just as an aside, if, maybe Qui-Gon came to Vader when he was, kinda in his little chamber. You never know, maybe he was talking him to and
I
training
wa
it, and he's like, "Anakin,
right?
I'm not going anywhere." It's like Jar Jar,
I
but
mean,
the Jar
we
Jar sparkly glow. It's Qui-Gon, "I'm here forever, and I'm gonna make you
yeah.
Anakin again." Yeah.
I mean, he sat in that big hot tub thing, like,
Doing what?
whatever that thing
We
was.
never really see
Mhm.
much. Not
Yeah, no,
really,
they never I mean, like, they go into things that haunt him, but yeah, no, they never deeply go into, like, what is he doing in
because
the
that's when
thing?
he's
No.
Anakin again. He kinda is bare, and he's just, "I'm myself. I'm forced to be."
Like, sit here in my regret,
The
like
right, in a sense, they've all kinda cloistered themselves, like, from Palpatine, who likes to be by himself, except with, like, those 2 red Centurion guards, or, like, and what is it? Yeah, Obi-Wan, of course, Luke for a time, like, a lot of them, they have to go into that, and I think the silence, the presence, a lot of these are Eastern,
yeah,
well, religious, spiritual stuff, there's definitely echoes in reality of it, and that's kind of where the Jedi go, as
yeah,
Buddhist monks too. There's a lot of crossover, and Buddhism is kind of the outlet
yeah,
for it, or the closest reflection, I would
yeah,
say.
like, the central, like, religious influence for the Jedi.
It's there, yeah. So I mean, but it's an amalgamation too. Even look at Game of Thrones, the Silent Sisters, the ones who deal with death all the time, the ones, picking up the bodies, they took a vow of
Mhm,
silence too, and that's just an interesting, kind of theme throughout history too, and
yeah.
in these fictitious worlds.
Actually, even something just about that just came to mind before I get back to another point I had about Barriss was so notice so we talked about how like the closest religious comparison to the Jedi are Buddhists and like think of like the robes. The robes are like a
Yeah.
thing, like
Mhm.
very much. What I
Tibetan
also
Buddhist.
see in the acolyte in this like period of like very high hubris for the Jedi,
High Republic,
High Republic, high
hubris.
hubris
That's a good I was gonna say that's a good
is
spin-off.
you know what, like, you know how, like, their, like, uniforms are right now, like, they're very, like,
Mhm.
white and cream and, like, very, like,
Elegant,
crisp,
like
right? Like,
high elves from
but
Lord
with
of the
the
Rings.
gloves, with the gauntlets, like, it
Right,
reminds me a lot of, like, Catholicism, like, pomp and circumstance with,
exactly.
like, the dolmens and the pope hat and, like, all, like, the clean
Mhm.
white silks and, like,
They're the
lush
clergy
fabrics.
they're the
Right?
clergy
It's
and the
very
Knights Templar, sort of, yeah. Mhm.
right? It's very clerical it's very clerical, very like Knights Templar, like, very, like, Roman Christian,
Right,
like,
it's a fusion of
themes, like and I think that's exactly
it's just more
see, I
ancient.
love that,
Did
like
you see the right? Because it is Rome.
see
Rome is the empire, Buddhism is the thing. There's always those 2,
exactly,
you
they
know?
the amount oh my god, the amount of, like, thought they put into the costumes. This is why there is going to be a psychology of dress episode whenever I get around to making that episode, because there's so much to infer. So much interesting stuff to infer from, like, so much different content across Star Wars. I love what they do with the costumes, they're so smart. But and I think that I mean, even down to, like, the Inquisitors, like, just seeing them in, like, Tales of the Jedi and, like, all the different helmets that, of course, are supposed to be, like, inferences of Vader, but just, like, I don't know, the anonymity, it, like, almost makes them feel like shadows.
Yeah, agreed. They're kind of
Like
like just yeah, in the background,
yeah,
but ever present.
exactly, like, shadows of Vader, shadows of their former selves, whoever they were, whether they were Jedi or not Jedi. And I think what and I think that was also interesting because notice how often, particularly in Tales of the Jedi, notice how often Barriss, like, took her helmet on and off.
Right.
Where it's like,
Totally
"Okay, I'm
interesting.
wearing this is what I'm supposed to be doing," but she took it off to talk to that child, like,
The
she
human, yeah.
exactly. And so So at this point in her story, oh god, I'd say I don't even know where we left off. This is what happens when you rant.
Well, once she was
uh,
Inquisitor and she's taken on a different style of dress, different attitude altogether.
yes. So at this point she's in the Inquisitorius, decides like, one, I'm gonna survive. Because I've been like I mentioned before, like she's pragmatic. She's a survivor. So even though I don't think she was ever on board with the Empire message or the Inquisitorius, she was like, well, I'm not gonna die. Like when she has to fight the other Padawan like for the lightsaber, when they're like, all right, like you two fight to the death, and she like even instinctively force chokes him. I don't even think she intends to do that, but she's like, well, you're about to kill me, so I'm gonna defend myself. Like she's the first person to stand up and defend her person, but also then stand up for what but then like also speak up to what she feels is like morally correct. And I think I really like that about her character. Like, I like that, one, it feels very real. Like, sometimes I feel like in a story, you can get very, like, one-sided on how, like, a character is shown, and I like that Barriss has a little bit more, like, color to her, a little bit more complexity. And but she decides in the end, I'll be an inquisitor. Like, it seems practical on the surface level because I don't wanna die. And clearly I can't be a Jedi anymore. There aren't any more Jedi. But even then that pragmatism then doesn't translate to the extremism that I think the Inquisitors display. Like when she goes to that planet with Lynn and Lynn like kills all those people who like kills all those villagers that lie about like where the Jedi is.
Mhm.
And Barriss, who's just like, "Oh, we're just here to get the information. That's what's practical." Like even when they land on the planet, she's like, "These people have nothing. Like, how is the Emperor letting this happen? Like, this isn't what a good leader should do." And of course, Lynn's like, "Well, they need to prove themselves to the Empire." And she was like, "Well, then let's do what we need to do and get out of here so that they can prosper. This isn't helping anyone. Like, clearly what we're doing isn't helping anyone right now." And then she's just mortified when Lynn takes that extreme route, like, we got the information. I got it with a, like, softer, like, practical approach of being nice to this kid, and this kid
Yeah,
told me
yeah.
what I need to know." And then Lynn is just like, "Hold my beer." Like,
Stab. Stab, stab.
yeah, stab, 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 stab. And it's just so sad to see, like, just her just, like, the in real time, like, disillusionment. Of
Again.
like, "Oh, again." Like, this is happening again," like, except it's even worse. Like,
Well, I think that speaks to what she is and her character. Like we saw the first half in not really episode 2, more in Clone Wars. The early episodes she was doing like, battle of the week sort of thing, but then they developed her with the bombing and Ahsoka's arc. And we thought, okay, that was the end of her character. She was a morally great character, disagreed with the Jedi, took extreme measures, that's it. Then we see now this rebirth. Like you said, she's a survivor. She's first offered the opportunity. That's the Jedi burning. Do you want to join them or do you want to be in the future? She's like, I'll be in the future, but knowing deep down, survive, and then you know, get even later if I got it. There'll always be the longer I live, the more opportunities there are for me to do what I believe is right. Let me get out of this prison
yeah,
first. Okay, become Inquisitor, become Darth Vader's pupil. Maybe she believed in it for a while, but she's like, the Jedi weren't for me, but this sure ain't it either.
mm,
This Inquisitor
yeah,
life. They're basically secret police or public police in some cases when they come to terrorize. They're the NKVD or KGB. They come knock, knock, knock. There goes justice. Sometimes it's not
oh, yeah,
even.
no, very Gestapo.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's just I'm just here to flex for the government or the ruling entity now, which is power. We're part of the power. Stand in the way, you get mowed like chaff. This is what happens. We don't care who you are. You're just here to make an example of you. Actually, take your resources if you got any. And that's kind of looking. And she's like, these are people. This is even worse than what I was aiming for. Things have really degraded here, and that's why she becomes what she's best at, a healer. She had her time in not healing. Now she goes back to that because she's like, that's the thing that brought her joy, not destruction.
Yeah,
In a way, that's sort of atonement. She has her time in prison, and even serving into factions that she disagreed with. I don't think she had that same sort of suffering Yoda did because her life was this constant suffering. The healing came
yeah.
after. The suffering was first, and then things got better for her arguably because she just changed her outlook and became an individual, committed
Yeah.
to the Force, committed to healing, committed to helping each individual regardless of who they were.
Yeah. I even a big thing that I wonder about Barriss is, and I may have already mentioned this, that like I don't even really feel like she fell to the dark side as like in like the, I guess like the traditional sense
Traditional
that we would think about. Like it's almost like Dooku said in Dark Disciple to Ventress, like you don't like live in the dark side, like you just flirt with it. Like you've like touched it and you've seen it and like you felt it, but I don't think she ever actually gave herself over to it. I think like when she got exposed to that plant and the and she went on her acid trip and she got like a more like expanded mind, I think she just took her own practicality and just looked at the bigger picture and was like, this ain't it. Like this war is ridiculous for whatever reason the Jedi started it. Like this is what they're supposed to be about. And they're all the way over in
They're
left field.
generals? How does a monk become a general, right?
Right? How does a monk become a general? And it's like we're so far removed from where we've been. And
Force from
maybe it was like that touch of the dark side that is like that led her to the temple bombing.
pragmatism.
Um Yeah, but right, like pragmatic. Like, how do I cause more like dissonance within the Jedi Council? Like, like this is the way to do it. Like, I can bomb this temple and I can blame it on someone else, and then it can like make them question these things, and then that'll cause like more of a rift, and maybe that might bring something closer to the end of the war, or it's going to, I don't know. I feel like Sith play the long game. Maybe there was like other steps if she didn't get caught.
Right.
Um,
How many people have free will in our poems too? It's hard to say how much control Palpatine had.
That's also another thing because
Did he just move her along with
an this was an excellent chess move on the point of Palpatine, and I don't
never let a
know,
good crisis go to
is
waste?
that ever confirmed?
No, but I think
Was
I
it
think
part of Palpatine's plan, or was it just convenient for
I
him?
think he went with the flow. It's like never let a good crisis go to waste. It's just kinda like, "Ah, this is it. I've been waiting as a dark side master. I've been waiting. This is the moment. I use it now." And that's his, like, suave feng shui. He's like, "Alright, this is it. I'll move this piece here because it's here. I knew it would come because I
Yeah,
I have a yen zen trust in this evil. The evil just comes. He's
right?
kind of like in his zen, the robot chicken Palpatine's the best. Like, yeah, man, I'm a
Right?
happy evil genocider. Like, it's all good.
It kinda worked out for him. Like, I think it's kinda the same, like, with how Maul killed Qui-Gon. I don't think he planned for him to kill Qui-Gon, but it was very convenient that he did because it would have been much more difficult for him to like work his claws into Anakin, particularly from such a young age, if Qui-Gon had been around. Because Qui-Gon one would have sensed all that shit,
Maybe he
and
yeah, sorry.
uh, no, sorry, and Palpatine wouldn't have been able to implant himself as that father figure
Right. He took
and,
the
like,
father figure
work
out.
his way in and, like, really groom him over the years like he did if Qui-Gon had been around filling that role.
He literally whacked them, right, and maybe Maul's whole role, and from the beginning, Palpatine knew it was just to be expendable, but, take out Qui-Gon at all costs, take out this chess piece, I'm sacrificing this chess piece to do it, and
Exactly.
he's like, Obi-Wan's but the thing is Obi-Wan was a father figure who ultimately kinda passed the baton to being more the father figure. At the end, who does, Anakin spend eternity with? His real papa. It's like Yondu says, "That may have been your father, but he ain't your pappy or your daddy." What does he say?
Right?
Yeah, that's the
Something like
thing.
that.
He's like but he's not your palpy in that sense. Palpatine's, like, on
Not
his
your
way
pal.
out, especially if he's not eternal anymore. He's out of the picture now.
Yeah.
He can clone himself as much as he wants on Earth, but what's Earth compared to eternity in this lore, at least, where clearly
Right.
there is an afterlife of some sort, whether it's molecular, particular, you can see unless they're on drugs or maybe broken psyches, you can clearly see these force ghosts from these characters' points of view, but you never know
Yeah.
actually, 'cause you have to be certainly attuned. How real are they? How much is it a projection of your own? Because they always say that too with religion or spirituality. How much is just your own, neurons
Right?
firing off because it's internal experience. No one else sees those ghosts. It's like, what are you talking about? Obi-Wan, you've been living in the desert a little too long, you know? There's some
Right,
interesting
right,
points
like
there.
huffing that peyote a little too often. Like
Well, but Barriss is like, getting back to her, she's the linchpin too because she's kind of like the new Vader. They kinda both go through six phases in their lives. I was thinking about that today.
mm,
You could divide it or subdivide it more, but ultimately, like, she goes from, what is it? Mer Mary Mary Ellen? I always forget. Mer
Marillion?
Mirali. I
Mer
gotta actually listen
Mer
to it.
Mer
I'm like that with
right?
Ilum and
Like,
Ilum. Ilum and Ilum and that
it's the
too. I always
I.
forget.
It's the Marie-Land.
We gotta YouTube the sound after, but like, that's her early life, right? What she's born into, her family, like, "I'm born into this world, I gotta get here somehow." Next, she became a, Jedi Padawan, then she became a Jedi Knight, needed in the war, general sorta fighter. Prisoner was her 4th stage, 5th Inquisitor, 6th Healer, right? So that was her arc that we had so far.
Mhm,
Vader, born a slave, that's how he was born, he was just from midichlorians. Then Jedi Padawan, Jedi Knight, so very much kinda different details, but follow that arc, then
mhm,
became Sith. So far there's like a one-to-one correlation in their phases. Then 5th stage very briefly becomes like Messiah, savior, kills Palpatine, the Redeemer, redeemed with, you know, Luke dies for sins. I don't know if Luke or Vader, there's kind of a crossover with the Christ and the Jon Snow, the Harry Potter, the chosen
yeah.
one, the
Space
Neo.
Jesus.
Space Jesus, right. That's role is kinda shared among Anakin and Luke, they kinda divide it, but and then there's his 6 phases,
Force
phaseless,
Ghost.
he's the Force Ghost, yeah, he's the afterlife, so that's his healer stage. So there is a one-to-one between each of their story arcs, and that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah,
Let me break them down skeletally and see, and I'm
I
like,
like that.
that makes me think that like with the Ahsoka franchise, I think they're gonna bring them together. It would be a wasted opportunity not to bring Barriss in and her and Vader anchor Ahsoka's morality and drive, because Ahsoka's the one now, the acting force.
Yeah,
She's the one pushing it forward. The rest are like advisors, sort of, or not to
yeah.
sideline Barriss, but Barriss is kind of there to supplement Ahsoka's arc. But I think down the road she'll become her own Ahsoka.
Right, like her own person, like, obviously she's playing an important role, like, in this network. I mean, whatever role that is, wherever she, like, happens to be on this, like, snowy world and this interesting little, like, alcove. No, I don't disagree, and I think that's really interesting to think about in, like, the 6 stages. I like that, like, breaks down quite
More or
neatly.
less. You could
More or less,
argue
more or
it's
less.
subjective. Maybe they didn't even think of that, but I like to see it. The story naturally replicates itself. It's like
Right? I'm
there's a
sure
wheel here.
I'm sure somewhere Filoni's like, "Are you reading my diary?"
You're
Like,
you have access to my scripts. All right, I'm calling the
right?
cops.
I'm
Warrant.
calling the cops. I'm
They got
call
access.
no, I'm calling my space police officers, the Jedi.
Oh yeah, the Inquisitors.
I'm calling the High Republic Jedi to come
What
in,
what I
in
think
their Pope Dolmens and take
what
you out.
terrifies me with the Inquisitors is they got the spinning lightsabers that
Right? The
swirl
spinning
or
thing is fucked up.
freaks
Like,
me out.
ooh.
It really, really not Palpatine, sorry, Grievous kinda started that trend with the, "Alright,
Yeah, this
buzzsaw."
we need the
Zzz. I'd prefer that honestly than a giant hole. The hole you're thinking, "I got a hole." When you're cut up, you're already mincemeat. That may be the more merciful way if I'm facing a formidable
right?
opponent.
No, I definitely don't disagree. Yeah, no, the spinning is crazy. First time I saw
Yeah,
that, I was like, "What the fuck?"
and Obi-Wan, they did that too in the right, with the Inquisitors. There was a scene with the
Was there? What was
pretty
going on? And I
sure.
definitely
Whenever
Yeah,
I
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, they had it, when Riva was fighting Vader.
Mhm. Right, they
Yeah,
gotta
when
use that.
she first attacked him. Yeah, yeah, no, you can't have an
And in
Inquisitor and not shoot them and
Survivor,
everything.
Jedi and the games too, yeah, for sure, they
Oh,
definitely,
I'm sure it looked sick in the games.
and the sisters, like, all the ninth and then the 6th and all that, they all the sisters and the Inquisitors, they're very big, and actually, I forgot the Grand Inquisitor was Jedi Temple Guard.
Mhm.
He is a
Actually
career opportunist.
right? Yeah, no, I enjoyed learning about him in Rebels, and it made me do, like, a fun little deep dive on him at the
We gotta
time.
do him one
And I
day.
and I just read today, and I guess, like, take Wikipedia with, like, a grain of salt, but I read that he was one of the guards who walked Barriss into the court tribunal when
Right,
she,
how
like, had to confess what she did, and I was like,
it's like,
"Ooh, I
"Now I'm
don't know how
judging."
we know that," but
But he's like, "Now
it's
I'm judging
cool.
you with this morality. The tables have turned." And it's like he's always sitting up on high, like, I'm on high now. You just happen to
Right?
be beneath me at this moment." And she's like, "Bro, what do you stand for, right? At least I know what I
Right?
stood for, what I did." It seems like you're just jumping from opportunity to opportunity. It's like,
Right, the Grand Inquisitor is definitely an opportunist.
oh, yeah, for sure.
Definitely an opportunist. Like, he just spent years getting just, like, probably ordered around by the Jedi, so Order 66 came, and he's like, "Hell yeah, fuck these guys."
Job.
Like, I am about this.
And Star Wars makes you do load those people because any of the hoity-toity Imperial officers too, like, you just like, "Oh, shut up." You're like, "I can't wait for you to get, whatever your fate is. I can't wait for that to happen because you're clearly inviting it." Some characters are just
Right?
what redeemable or not, they could just be obnoxious, and to me, that's who he is. I'm like, "You are scum. If I ever met you,
Yeah.
I would hope you not kill me first, but otherwise, I would just not be your friend. You're not a good person."
Right?
With
You're
Barriss, I'm like,
you're not nice.
I would like your company at different phases of your life, not as an inquisitor, but maybe the other
Exactly.
phases in your
Um,
life.
it definitely is, and I mean, I feel like that's how so many stories go. Is that, like, you're clearly who you're supposed to dislike. You know who you're supposed to like, you know who you're supposed to dislike, and you know when you're being given, like, an anti-hero where you're like, "I know you're doing bad things, but I like you a lot." Like, I think one of the most obvious examples I've seen of this in another amazing show is Ted Lasso.
Oh, yeah, I only saw
Oh,
part the first, I didn't fulfill yet.
ooh, you should finish Ted Lasso.
Yeah, I
It's
know, but
it's so nice.
that's the
It
zeitgeist, everyone's
it
saying you gotta do it.
it's so nice. I've in fact, Joey was the one who told me, like, "Get Apple
Yep,
TV
he
just to watch Ted
he he's
Lasso."
he said that when he was in Vegas too, that's funny. "Hey, Joey."
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
hi, Joey. It is of all, like, the dramas and the epics and the thrillers and the dystopian societies and everything, Ted Lasso was just nice. And, like,
It's a little
you
touch of
loved everyone. It was just really touching character development, like, complex, like, layered people, and there was only one person you disliked in the end. And even that person, they
was
made you
meant to
feel
be.
sympathy for at some point, right before they just hammered home, like, "Nope, that guy's a dick. That guy's a dick," and it's fine, and you felt fine, like, yeah, it's fine that he's a dick because he's bringing it on himself, so you don't feel bad about disliking him. Because that was I mean, that's the guidance of storytelling. Like, tell me how I should feel in this story.
Well, it's good. That's good to have that because sometimes escapism isn't always escapism. Sometimes people, as great and relatable that Star Wars is, sometimes you need a story that's set in the real world just to feel like the fresh. I don't have to worry about someone's head just coming out with tentacle. Like you could just expect the possible. And that,
Exactly.
there's a certain escapism in that letting your guard down. Whereas in Star Wars, you can't always let your guard down because it's a wide galaxy full of things that border on horror sometimes. Don't forget it does go into like
Right?
1950s pulp horror, so
Right.
but Ted Lasso, I think from what I hear, from what I've seen, it's sweet and people like those sweet, charming, sort
Yeah.
of like uplifting, inspirational stories.
Yeah, and, we don't get enough of them. I guess that's what I felt by the time I got to the end of it, and I won't harp on Ted Lasso for too long.
That's what we're here for, to harp.
So nice to talk about. It's just it made me feel warm. Like how,
Mhm.
like, a work can really just, like, steer, like, your emotional direction, your emotional reflection of it. It's a warm show. You just ended every episode just feeling good. You're
I
like,
think
"Oh, man,
I'll
that's
check it
so
out after
nice."
Shogun. I'm gonna watch Shogun and then I'll watch Ted. Yeah, that'll probably be
Oh,
nice.
you haven't watched Shogun yet?
Nope, I was going to watch it, but then I went to Japan,
Uh,
ironically, and that
there you
got in
go,
my
you
way.
did go to Japan. Shogun's
It's
very
like
good.
I saw my
You'll
Shogun in Osaka, yeah. Oh, I do wanna
you'll you'll enjoy Shogun. Especially after just coming from Japan,
oh, yeah.
you'll enjoy the fuck
I
out of
love
Shogun.
Tokugawa, I love closed door Japan, all that stuff, it's just fascinating. Samurai, yeah, give it to me, and there I like that's what I love about Star Wars Visions, that to me is like the bit of the anime, the
Yeah.
Rurouni Kenshin, the Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman, there's a lot of, like, good samurai lore, and that's where the Japanese
Mhm.
culture, they went even farther east in Visions, and that's what I love about that alternate kind of perspective. It's really cool. It's to me, it's the
Right?
what if of Star Wars, really. But
Yeah, no, it's a nice opportunity to tell other smaller stories and also to play with, like, animation
a lot.
style. That's fun.
And to
Love
play
it.
with, like, it goes a little bit beyond what's possible in Star Wars. I feel like there's even more fantastical stretches in Visions because
Yeah.
they're not bound by the same uniformity where they gotta talk to, like, corporate and these other artists and be like, "Is this okay if we do this? Will this affect your
Right?
story?" Visions, like, have at it. It's a standalone.
Yeah.
You know, you can put a little mushroom on a racing cart, no one would say anything. We know it's,
Right? Right, we know it's all okay. Yeah, no, it's but, I mean, reverting back to Star Wars. But go watch Ted Lasso. Definitely
And
put
all
that
of
on
you,
your short
and
list.
all of you.
Um, I think that what's so nice about, I guess, Barris's story in the end is, I mean, she reaches that point of peace. Like she realizes, like, you know what, like what I learned from the Jedi, like, wasn't wrong. And even like what some of what I learned from the Inquisitors wasn't like all wrong. It was just like the approach. The approach was wrong. Like this wasn't really working, but this isn't really working either. Like maybe like you take, I mean, it's kind of like anything we do. Like we take the bits of ourselves and we move on to the next thing, and we move on with those lessons of what didn't work and what wasn't correct. And that's kind of the only way that we learn sometimes, is like having those like negative dark experiences. And that it doesn't mean, and by examining those dark experiences doesn't mean that you fall into the dark side, doesn't mean that you've given yourself over. It just means that you can reflect, means that you can take that step back and have that pragmatic look at things and do better going forward. I don't think that you can do better going forward if you don't look at what didn't work in the past. At the same time, also don't ruminate in things.
Yes.
It's like what Bail Organa said, also in the Ahsoka novel, that like we can't be like Barriss, who lived in the past, but we can't be like the I don't remember who he quoted, but he can't be like someone else who only looks to the future. Like you need to like sometimes we need to be present, and that's what we need to do
Right.
right now is be present.
And that's kinda what Star Wars is. It's like, we're at this fork in the road now. Let's not worry about the past forks, the future forks. Like Padme says it, "You're going down a road I cannot follow," or a path I cannot follow. That's when Anakin takes that fork. A lot of the characters, it's like they may veer off trail, and that's what life is. The guideposts are there, like from ancient wisdom to guide us because of like trial and error. They're like, here's what's worked for X number of people for many, many years. Sometimes the guidepost not necessarily fails a person, but it may not be for you. It's like this path, I can't go down this one. Just doesn't jive with who I am. I'm physically unable to get through this over here.
Yeah.
Through this crevice. So it's like, tell me who goes through life without tripping. And I mean in the sense like stumbling. Like Barriss, has these guideposts. They kind of fail her. They don't match with reality, and that upsets her. That delusions her in both regards. She goes down one trail, another. All right, this porridge is just right, and that's kind of her arc. She's kind of like, what's her name, Goldilocks. She's like, all right, this is too hot, too
Yeah.
cold. This one is just right,
Right.
and
Another excellent story about morality.
yeah, yeah, and that's what
Yeah.
Star Wars. It blends the Greeks, the Romans, the Arthurian tale, like everything. Really, it's just
Right.
every piece of literature ever written. Star Wars just does a good job at making it its own, and that's what I think is really cool about the Star Wars universe. It doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. It's a nice smoothie. It blends everything good, and you're like, this is
Exactly.
perfect. That you don't need to
Exactly.
reinvent the chocolate peanut
It's
butter smoothie.
it's a story smoothie in space.
Yeah, 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 pretty much. And it is very accessible. As deep as it goes, what's always good is it doesn't get too like Steve Erickson or Wheel of Time or like, oh my God, or Game of Thrones, like how many
Right.
houses? Like it's very on the nose. You could just kind of jump in anywhere and get it. Like I get it. As
Yeah.
deep as it goes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I understand the story that's being presented to me. I may not know the entire story. And I do feel that as they go on with content, I mean maybe I'm just biased because I enjoy knowing everything. I do feel like very few things can stand by themselves in Star Wars. It's like you can enjoy it as, like, an individual thing, but there's so much going on in the bigger picture that it serves you better to watch all of it. I think the only thing that stands by itself is honestly season 1 of The Mandalorian.
In terms of, like, understanding or in terms of enjoyment? Understanding.
I think understanding. Everything's enjoyable. Like, I remember watching Revenge of the Sith years ago, just, like, before I'd seen anything else, and I was like, "This was a good movie." I feel like there's things I didn't understand, but it was a good
Mhm.
movie.
Right, you got the
Um,
basic. Yeah.
yeah, I got the gist. Like, I knew there was stuff I was
Okay.
missing.
It's
Yeah,
a it's like the end of yeah, it's like Octavian becomes Augustus, like, "Okay, I get it."
yeah,
Shifting in government here,
yeah. But with season 1 of The Mandalorian, particularly because it was the first in what I consider to be the first Star Wars thing I really watched, like, in its entirety, I didn't feel like I was lacking by not having Star Wars knowledge.
Right, right, and I think it's easy to just jump in even if you haven't been a Star Wars fan for a while, you've been a casual Star Wars fan in the past, and say you
Yeah,
stopped after Revenge of the Sith, say you just tuned out, didn't watch the sequels for 20 years, you didn't really do jump in. If
yeah,
you just jump into that, you can,
yeah.
and
Which I think is nice. I mean, I love the later seasons because they do incorporate all the Mandalorian lore, and at that point, like, I was with it. But season 1, you don't need to really have too much. You have an adorable little creature known as
and that
Grogu.
that brought
You
in
have you have a scary villain, you have a hero. It's all the tropes are there.
honestly, I think marketing-wise and just bearing like, the results it bore, it did a better job than the sequels. Maybe they spent more per capita to try to bring in new fan base, but a lot of women got more into Star Wars who thought it was the dorkiest crap ever, honestly. That was their words, not mine. Like, my old she's styled my hair once, she's like, not for me," but then she watched The Mandalorian, she's like, Baby Yoda, she's like, "Now I wanna watch the old stuff because there's a bigger Yoda in that one." She's like, "This Italian, she's like, there's a bigger Yoda in that one, and now I'm interested." And then she's like, "This is a great story, I'm sorry I called it dir" you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it was like the tackle and bait, you lure 'em in, cute
Right,
french
you
fries.
gotta lure 'em in with something.
But
Even on my vendor table over the weekend, I had, like, all my, like, little Star Wars stuff, and so I had Baby Yoda on one side of the table, and I had my Vader on the other side of the table, and I'm like, "One of these will lure people in. I wonder which." Like,
that's interesting. Right, right, it's like
it was an interesting little experiment to see what people notice first.
right, right, and you can always test psyches through the red pill or the blue pill experiment,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. I'll tell you the secret, it was majority Baby Yoda. Like, majority of people are like, "Ooh, Baby Yoda."
It's
And
yeah.
I'd be like, "It's Grogu, first of all, he's the
It's true.
name."
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
he finally got his name and because they were just like, You're not gonna market you're not taking over the marketing, we are,"
right?
And he has a name, so he's different.
We're in control.
Right,
Like,
that's like naming, I guess, Luke, I don't know, baby well, not they didn't know the father at the time, so I guess baby Owen, like, "Alright, you
right,
don't get a
yeah, I
name."
was gonna say Uncle Owen.
Yeah, you're just baby Owen, Uncle Owen and baby Owen, sorry. And it's like, "Hey, just because I look like him." Well, not really. Well, that's interesting too when you talk about morality. I was s tracing it back when I was like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of, like, incestual kills, like, not consummation sexually, but consummation in terms of, I'm the one to kill you, even though you're related to
Mhm,
me," sort of, with there is the Skywalker family tree, of course,
mhm.
going all the way down to Rey, I guess. But when you really look at it, like, Vader killed Leia's step-parents. That's kind of
Mhm.
his own kin. You know,
Yeah.
he he kinda killed Owen and Beru through his stormtroopers. More, oh, okay, fratricide in a sense. It's,
Yeah.
not literally, but
I think it's
with the
kinocide? Kin
right, at that point, because you're he's the stepfather to you're the father.
yeah.
So what is he to you? Maybe that was a power move too. Maybe he's been waiting all
Step fratricide.
maybe
Step patricide.
well, maybe subconsciously he knew Owen was also that surrogate father, and he wiped him out. He got Obi-Wan out of the way. He's like, You're in the way of my baby boy. That's my
Yeah.
Luke. And same with Leia. I think he kind of was an overprotective father, not knowing again, because he didn't know on the surface. He saw it in Return of the Jedi. He's like,
Yeah.
sister. So he didn't the Force made it clear over time, but I think deep down he was so intuitive, especially being
Yeah, like,
Darth
he
Vader.
knew there was something.
His Force knew their Force, and protected it even without his knowledge, you know? And I don't I say protected in a really sick way because you shouldn't kill family
Right?
members like that. But that was kind of Vader's. I bring him into this because
I
again,
love
they
you.
tie them. Right, I love it.
Like,
And but, like, with Barriss too, going back to her, there is that sort of, like, you know, end justify the means thing where she's going through that transitory state where she's figuring out what is morality, what is the right thing to do here. Here's
yeah,
the action I've taken.
my favorite Star Wars theme, the ends justify the means.
Yeah, yeah. It's,
That is seen over and over and over.
well, but certain characters, like, I would say Qui-Gon is divorced from Jedi because he got so much flack in Episode 1. Look how much screen time is devoted to him bucking against them, basically. It's the Senate,
Right?
you know? It's Palpatine bucking against the Republic, and it's Qui-Gon bucking against the Jedi Council.
Yeah.
There's internal reform and revolution coming, and they don't realize it yet. Qui-Gon does. Certain individuals throughout were able to have that zen and have that clairvoyance, and, you know, I would say Qui-Gon was one of them. He was very prescient and understanding of what was to come, so much that
Yeah.
he became Yoda's master when before he was, you know, the Padawan through
Mhm.
Dooku and what but he flipped it, and I think finding that consciousness too is something not everyone's Qui-Gon, but they can get there along the way, you know? I think Anakin, Barriss, they're closer to it towards the end of their lives in their next chapters
Mhm.
than many
Yeah.
ever hope to be, you know, in the universe. So that in a sense, in end justify the means, for them it was the means justify the end, if that makes sense at the same time, because they all ended in a happy place, as
Yeah.
distorted as happy can be, you know? They did did or died for a greater good, you know, or
Yeah.
came close to die.
I am very interested in how Barriss possibly died, because obviously she helped that family get away with their force sensitive child. Oh god. Sorry, as the night gets later.
It's almost 15?
Helped that family get away with their force sensitive child, and then obviously like
Yeah.
Lynn got lost in the caves and she went in. Like, I don't know if she knew that Lynn would stab her. She seemed surprised when it happened. But to know, like, this is, like, the sacrifice I have to make in order for Lynn basically to come back from the dark.
Honestly, yeah, I think that's what it was. She's like, "I'm gonna hold a mirror to her, and this is the only way," which you've seen throughout Star Wars and other works, of course, you know,
Yeah.
it's always, "I'm gonna sacrifice to make this person better because 'cause you're deep down, and I'm gonna" like, Luke does it, of course, in
Yeah.
Return of the Jedi, that's the most classic one-to-one. "I'm gonna be electrocuted by this old wizard to show you, father, that I'll die because I love you, and you need to do the right thing here," you know, and that's kind of it's weird when you put it that
Yeah.
way, but, like, yeah, it's like
No,
this.
fair.
Or like Voldemort, "I'm this giant snake man coming out of a cauldron to kill you, you teen," you know, it's like, "This keep this creepy guy away from me," you know, but look, like, you know, this is the what we're against, and you kinda see that with Barrish, she's like, "I'm gonna do this," and honestly, to me, that was Dave Filoni saying, "I'm gonna take that scene from The Last Jedi and do it better," where Luke is stalling for time, he's like, "Get out of here, I'm gonna sacrifice myself, focus all your firepower," that's the only thing that was missing from that Filoni scene, but he did it in, I think, in a more, to me, at least, emotionally satisfying way, because even though I was close to Luke throughout the whole series, I just think Barris's end, you know, so to speak, was executed better. You know, she was executed better in a sense because I just think it had more logical consistency. I think
Yeah.
in those 45 minutes, they did such a good job at developing her and giving her this whole second arc that it was just
Yeah.
I told you this, it was one of the strongest things that I thought happened in Star Wars in a while. You know, it's very muted and under the radar, but very powerful.
I agree. It was definitely very, very moving. Like, even when they're fighting in the snow before she goes into the cave, and she's just like dodging her, just and she says the line like your anger makes you predictable, which is of course like a reverse of like what the Grand Inquisitor told her 2 episodes before of like your Jedi. What did he say? To like your
What did the
something
Inquisitor
makes
say?
you
To oh, when the
predictable.
right, right, he's like,
Yeah,
"I
like
know"
what
yeah, exactly, "I know your next move," basically.
yeah, like your
No
kindness
weapon.
makes you predictable, or
I don't need
your
weapons.
like lack of anger makes you predictable.
But then
So
she
I thought it was
pushed him.
so I thought it was great when she was fighting her and she's just like so grounded in who she is. She shows her of herself that she's like, "I don't even need a lightsaber to fight you."
And she kinda echoes that. That's the training that she got. She took the Jedi training and the Inquisitorial training, like you said, that, shaped who she was in the end. She was a healer, she was many things. She's been a
Yeah.
lot through a lot in her life. Yeah, that's a great I never really kinda actually put that correlation together. And it's interesting too, because it's like, oh, okay, so, you know, okay, if she's dead, then mission accomplished. Seems like her body was
Yeah.
taken back. There was care, there was sympathy in that heart, in Lynn's heart. So, even if that was her minimal goal, she attained it. Best case, she lives
Mm.
and can go on.
Right? Pulled one person back from the dark.
Right, that's and we talked about this in the last one, net positive. She left the galaxy a better place than she found it. Maybe she killed X amount, but how many people did she save in that last scene? Through that family, through Lynn, like, through maybe countless others that maybe she's no longer an inquisitor, maybe she's no longer going to
Right?
torture people, or you don't know the overall ripple effect. Then that's kind of what Star Wars is about. You drop a pebble in a pond and see where it ripples out
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, no, and you never know who that, like, baby Jedi went on to save, and like you say, you
Right.
don't know the families that you've saved in the end, and that's the potential of it all. That's the hope.
A New Hope,
That
right.
is that is all that Star Wars hope.
Well, it's just it's a new Disney Plus series in the making. They're like, "It's gone on. Look what new franchise you started through," and that wouldn't happen if she didn't save her. And I say that sardonically, but I say that honestly, like, still as a fan, I like content. I want it all.
Yeah.
Some's weaker than others, of course, but you need a hierarchy of that. That's just like any installment. And I just think it's really cool, especially the Filoni preserve. I think he obviously is, to me, the best writer of I think we agree that, he's just really he gets it, he's on point.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to see where he keeps spinning out of. It's like a chimera. He just keeps going and going. Like, you think, "Okay, that's all he can tell," and somehow he does it differently, but the same. Like, he's very talented in his sense of storytelling. It is kind of like Game of Thronesy where it's, meandering, and not in a bad way, but
Yeah.
curves and twists and
Yeah, no, like, it's not like a linear story. I like how we still kinda, like, bop around the timeline, like, it's nothing like, "Oh, we're just telling the story straight through," and so you have to be like, "Okay, where are we? When are we? Who's around? What are we doing?" And I think that's half the fun,
He
personally.
could he could jump in at any point. So we did what? Jedi, Tales of the Empire. Now we could do Tales of the New Republic, for instance. He can do more Ahsoka based, even though
Oh,
the
the
live action
tales are so good. The
some of
tales,
the best.
they can milk that to the end of the world. Good for
Genius.
them.
Every episode, yeah, they do like 2 story arcs per season, but you can do, if you wanna do 6 installments, you could do 1
Mhm.
episode, focus on a completely different era. You could show me the what were they called? Rakata Prime? Bring in them, those first Force discoverers, back in the do a whole if Filoni handled that I'm sure those 20 minutes will be fascinating. I think that would be really
Right?
cool. He
Right? I
could go
mean
far into the future too.
right? I mean, I wouldn't even be mad about and I don't know if it'd be enough time to tell the story, but I wouldn't be mad to get, like, some Revan in there. That'd be
I
pretty
think
sick.
I think there's a corporate policy, like, don't jump into any pools that we haven't opened yet, don't go there because we don't want you to block the way for what our next game plan is, sort of, and that makes sense. We're like,
True.
"Oh,
True.
Republic's there, we're getting to it, but just
We're getting to
don't
it.
be the first one to
Right
fire the shot. We'll fire the
right
shot."
there.
It's
It's right there
right
just waiting. It's
they're
waiting in the
going
wings.
well, I was getting excited because the High Republic in its 3 phases, it went, 1 phase 1 was what, 200 years? 2 phase 2 was even earlier. Phase 3, then it went back, or forward. And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
they're going back. Ah, nope, 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 yank, yank, yank." And it's interesting because 'cause they're
Yeah.
kinda teasing it a little bit. I think now with the end of the
Yeah.
High Republic, maybe they'll go into another phase that's even, like, 700 years before, Yoda's 200 years
Yeah.
old, and then get to the Old Republic. I think it's the only way to really prolong those millennia, which is a smart
Yeah.
business move. I would do that if I were the same. You
But
don't wanna do
because
it all at once.
there's so much content to mine, like, what's the rush?
And you want everyone, all the artists and creators coordinating together. You don't want such a wide variety.
Yeah.
You kinda want everyone, "Okay, you're in this pool for now." Otherwise, it's not a pool party, like Vegas. If you're all spread out
Mhm.
in all the different pools, you're not really telling a cohesive, satisfying story. You can do that,
Exactly.
but they focus, they narrow. That's why they're not big on prequel or sequel stuff at any one time. They still dabble, but they focus maybe, okay, here's a spurt of it, here's some rapid fire, here's some inner cool stuff, original stuff. Now here's some New Republic stuff, but they won't do like with the phases, like with the High Republic, like they didn't release at
Mhm.
the same time as the Old Republic because they know that'll be the successor to it, and this will go for decades if they do it right, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, the sky's the limit over there at, Skywalker Ranch. They definitely they'll be given to us for a long time. Do you have any final thoughts on Barriss Offee and her very layered, complex journey?
I guess, like I said, if I'll just reiterate, if our story's over, okay, those extra 45 minutes are great, and I'd love to see her more in the comics, but hopefully she survived, and I think she could help at least co-helm or helm the franchise to a certain degree in this new kind of, era, new cast of characters in terms of, enriching and their layers and showing what their role is in the overall story, especially as Ahsoka, Thrawn, Ghost Anakin seem to be literally the future of where they're
Right,
going, as well as the Mandalorian Filoniverse thing. They're kind of intersecting. Rebels too. You're seeing everything kind of coalesce. So with her, I think she is being developed as an interesting, maybe not linchpin, but she's definitely in one of those circles in the Fellowship. She's in the Fellowship, let's
yeah,
say it that way, and I think that's who she's being developed as, but psychologically, I think she speaks to people. I think she speaks to me, I think there's with redemption and identity, I think, that's always a running theme, but in short, I think she was a really good crucible for that to be tested. I think she was a really good cross-section of what Star Wars is about, and they did it really successfully with her, so it's been a long game too. Since what I was 12 when I saw, no, I was 11 when I saw Attack of the Clones, and what I'm about to be 34. So she's been in my life for decades. I didn't always really know it or was aware of it.
right, you know,
And,
it's nowhere.
and here I'm doing podcasts about her. So that speaks to who her character is and what Star Wars is about.
I think that is really cool, and it is interesting. I like doing these, and you'll come to love it too, James, as we do more characters. I like doing these characters that, like, they're minor sub characters, like they're minor, but like they still play such a major part, and I love parsing out characters like this because their motivations are so human. Like 9 out of 10 times they're so human, and I think it's what's wonderful about this project in general and the podcast in general. It's just getting to see that sense of, like, moral humanity reflected in these characters and, like, what we can pull from that for ourselves. And I think that Barris is a great example of that.
Agreed. Art is kind of, it shows us potential realities, so we don't always have to we can live through it vicariously, like, watching Sopranos. I don't have to be a gangster now, great, I get it. You know,
Right.
in Star Wars, it's like, okay, that's the consequence of my actions for X character. If I were to take that path, if I were to have that same emotion or vision or passion in X moments, like what are my decisions in that moment in that moment, and that's what makes you think, and that's what Star Wars is so good at. It makes you understand, like, yourself a little bit better, like, "Huh, confronted with that conflict, 'cause conflict is in all of us and in the world, how would I react? Would I be any different? Can I be better? Can I be worse? Am I to judge? Am I to
Right?
sympathize?" And it gets you asking those questions. You may not have the answers, but that's what I think is really, really fantastic about it.
Yeah. Would you just cower to the Empire and fall in line, or would you balls up and join the rebellion?
That's the terrifying thing, right? Do you become a Nazi?
Right?
Do I become an imperial? Am I gonna, like, "Hey, you know what? They got good pension, they got good workers' comp," well, not really, but I get thrown into the airlock, but, like, "Hey, you know, I'm living this life, so I gotta blow up a few planets. Hey, how else do you get ahead in this?"
Eh,
That's the incentive structure, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I like
yeah.
to think I'm better than that, but test it with that. Give me a
Right?
Star Destroyer, what would I do with it, you know?
Right, you don't know until you know.
Right,
I
I'm
think
promoted to the,
we all
yeah,
battle with that. We do not know until we know.
right, and that's what life is. It's not just theory, it's experience too, and that's what was so good about Barriss, Ahsoka, especially Vader, but Barriss really too.
Mm,
Experience, we saw through her eyes. She lived it, she walked the walk, and we kinda experienced what she did along the way in a very visceral way. It was very telling
mhm,
from a humanity standpoint, it was very like, wow, this is a deep psychological Saw game in a sense. Her life was kinda like Saw on one
right.
level, like, you're trapped, Jigsaw's testing you. What are you gonna do? And that's what was present for me watching it. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, what would I do if I were, you know?
Right, like, you sit there and you question, like, "Hmm, like, what would I do in their shoes? I don't know." And you have this, like, ideal reaction. You're like, "Oh, I would do this or I would do that." And it's like, you don't know. You don't know until you know.
So, you know, yeah.
And let's find out if you need to, take a bearish vow due to regrets in your relationship with the Force.
Or Barriss Offee, yeah.
Yes,
That's all I
yes.
was thinking the whole time. But it's just so amazing, yeah. It is fun to do these little characters because even the little ones are just as big and maybe not on a popular appeal level, but in terms of overall storytelling, they're hammering home the same, again, John Williams motif. It all is part of the same force, and it all plays together. You know, they're all part of this one story, and we could be living Star Wars for all we know, you know? Again, it does say
Right?
in the beginning,
And
it's in our gal it's in our universe.
right, it's in right, in galaxy far, far away, like oh, but this has been absolutely excellent, James. I think this has been a fabulous inaugural episode. Fabulous, fabulous. And eventually I'm gonna have you doing this bit soon. Trust me, we're gonna have some rehearsals and we're gonna get this really crispy. It's gonna be nice.
How about
Um
the Padawan becomes, the apprentice becomes the master. That would be cool.
exactly. Exactly. So first we gotta tell them to follow all the socials. We gotta reiterate. We always gotta talk about the socials.
Yes, follow the
So
socials, that's important in this day and age, and if you like this, you gotta support because that's the only way you grow, and if you do enjoy the content, always, always plug it, always shout it, always represent it because that's just how, the ripple spreads in the pond. You guys gotta, really just if you enjoy this content, you'll get more of it, just subscribe and this will keep us going too because we like to deliver more, take ideas, continue this, invite on new guests and we're here for that sort of movement. So if you guys do believe in it as we do, then it will become reality. It already is. So let's just spread it out,
spread it around. Spread it around town.
shine it around.
Excellent. That was great. That was a good first run.
Oh, this
Yes,
part.
and if you have any questions for me and James, if you wanna share any big Star Wars feelings or anything of that sort, please drop us an email at mindtheforcepodcast@gmail.com. We're here for all of it. We'll be willing to chat with you about anything Star Wars at all times of the night. And with that said, this has been episode 10 of Mind the Force. I'm Kristine McPartlin. He's James Abbate. Welcome to the team, James. And I will see you all next time. And stay mindful.